Microsoft makes big cuts to partner benefits, then walks them back days later. Dave Seibert joins us to discuss. Plus, Microsoft Teams gets numerous updates while BitTitan rolls out Teams support to Migration Wiz. It's ChannelPro Weekly, episode 110. Microsoft cuts benefits. Psych. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 110. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine gaggle of compadres that we've assembled for you here today. Joining us this week and each and every week is the man you know as Captain Serious, the man on the road, the man who makes denim and sport jackets merge together in perfect fashion, executive editor Rich Freeman.
Greetings, everybody.
Hello, Rich. Good to see you, my good friend.
How you doing this week, Matt?
I'm alive. I'll say that. But we are not alone. We are not alone, and we have a special guest, one whom you've met before. Have you listened and or watched in the past? But it is always a party when Mr. Dave Seibert, CIO of IT Innovators and the impresario du jour, I don't know what that means, but I'm just going to use those words anyway, of SMB Tech Fest, Dave Seibert.
Matt, you are never at a loss for words.
I can never guarantee that the words I'm using are correct. Because when I talk, my mouth moves faster than my brain, and I guarantee it gets me in trouble a lot. So for all of you joining us here in episode 110, we had a little delay getting started, and we're all running up against some hard deadlines. So this is going to be a slightly shorter ChannelPro Weekly than you are all probably used to. So we're not going to have a museum pick. We're not going to have a tech pick. We're going to try to get through some of the. Well, we might save some of the stories depending on how we do it on time. But we are coming in right hot off of some big announcements from Microsoft, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to get Dave here to join us to talk about some of these, because some of them they're a big deal, and we need to dive through them. So, Rich, why don't we just go ahead and just get started? And let's just preface this by saying Microsoft is broke, and they are going to not pay people anymore, right? Because when you think poor companies, you think Microsoft first.
Yeah, hard up for cash over there in Redmond, right? That does sort of play into this. So,
no, but they've got a lot of couches there, Rich. They've got a lot of couches.
Yes, they do.
Can start diving for coins. I think it's about time. So really tell us what they announced, and then we're going to talk about kind of what it means.
Okay, I'll recap the first part of this relatively quickly. I would suspect the vast majority of people who are listening to this podcast right now are Microsoft partners, and the vast majority of those Microsoft partners know the first part of what I'm going to talk about here very well. They probably just began learning about it last week. Some of them may have learned about it this week. But July 1st was the beginning of Microsoft's new fiscal year. In conjunction with that, they announced some changes to the benefits and requirements associated with membership in the Microsoft Partner Program. In particular, for many years, Microsoft partners, anyone who's been a member of the Partner Program, has had access to internal use rights to a whole selection of Microsoft products, on-prem, cloud-based, a whole bunch of Microsoft software. You had internal use rights to that software. Now, the idea behind that basically was that they wanted to give their partners licenses that could be used in customer demos, dev test work, employee training. But most partners actually use that software to run their business. That, they use the Office 365 licenses, for example, internally just to run the business. And it's a way of educating themselves about the products as well. But I think it's fair to say most partners kind of viewed that as one of the benefits of being in the partner program. At all levels of the program, whether you have a silver competency, a gold competency, or you're sort of at the entry level Microsoft Action Pack subscription level, you're paying Microsoft money, and partners sort of view these internal use rights as what they were getting in return for the money that they were paying. So Microsoft,
and there's a benefit to that too, Rich. Let me interrupt. Now, there's also to say, because I've talked to a lot of Microsoft partners, especially these days and way in the past, and a lot of this was how they learned this software, right? And how they learned to sell it is because they would use it internally.
Yeah, it's a concept that internally within Microsoft they call eating your own dog food, right? And it's this cherished idea in Redmond, basically, that they run the business on their own software, on the beta versions of things, because, to your point, that is how you'll learn about the stuff that you're going to be selling out there. So internal use, what Microsoft announced at the beginning of the new fiscal year is internal use rights are sticking around, but not for running your business. You can still, use the software for demos and employee training and all that. You can't run your business on it anymore. So that was announcement number one. Big deal for a lot of partners. Partners were furious about this. Issue number two, there were product support incidents, free product support incidents that you got along with the IUR, the internal use rights software. Product support incidents for the on-premises internal use software was taken away. Issue number three, they raised the bar pretty significantly in a lot of cases for what you had to do to qualify for one of those silver or gold level competencies. And they raised the bar in a way that was going to make it very, very difficult for some partners to retain their current competency level. All three of these things infuriated partners. Earlier this week on Tuesday, I was with a small group of people in the media who were invited on campus at Microsoft for a series of briefings in anticipation of Microsoft Inspire, their annual partner conference. That takes place next week in Las Vegas. It gave us an opportunity to speak directly with Gabriella Schuster, who runs the entire partner operation. It's called the One Commercial Partner Organization within Microsoft. Needless to say, we had a lot of questions about this. We wanted to understand, in particular, why are the IUR rights going away? And this is where, your sort of preamble to this story comes in. The answer to that basically was, look, in the old days, because they've been doling out IUR software for many, many years. And in the old days when they did that, all they were basically doing is allowing you to go online, do a download of some on-premises piece of software and run it on your server. And, the incremental cost to Microsoft was practically zero. Now they're handing out cloud-based software that's, running in Azure. They're handing out Office 365. There are infrastructure costs associated with that. There are sort of back-end support and administration costs associated with that. And Microsoft, the partner organization within Microsoft, is sort of given an annual budget for cloud capacity to hand out to the partners. And the partner program is so big, it's growing pretty rapidly right now. They just blew past their budget for the previous fiscal year. And I mean, so much so that they had to cancel some things that they were planning to do last year to kind of make room to handle these cost overruns. As they looked ahead to the current fiscal year that began just last week, they thought to themselves, there is absolutely no way we can continue to do this anymore. And so they said, we've just got to cancel all that, those internal use rights. They were looking around for other efficiencies as well. And so the on-premises IUR software support incidents, their numbers told them that only about 1% of partner program members were actually using that benefit. There's overhead attached to it. They figured we'll cancel it. 99% of partners aren't really going to notice the difference. Turned out some people kind of noticed the difference. On the competency benefits, the thinking was the partner program is giant, and it, like I said before, it's growing rapidly. The whole idea of awarding competency, silver or gold level to a partner, is to tell customers, to tell end users, these are our best partners. And if more and more partners are earning those competencies, that community of best partners gets to be so big after a while, Microsoft said, that the idea of being a best partner doesn't really mean very much anymore. And so they felt like they needed to raise the bar on what it takes to earn a competency, just so that being labeled a best Microsoft partner continues to mean something. Now, like I said, partners were unbelievably furious about this. Dave can provide us great context for that, for reasons I'll explain in a moment. As we record this, we're live on video right now, but for folks who are listening to the audio, it is Friday morning, July 12th here on the West Coast. It is 11:14 a.m. Right this moment. Approximately 3 hours ago, Gabriella Schuster published a blog post announcing that Microsoft was rescinding All of those changes I just described to you, 100%, they're all going away. They confessed in that blog post that they may not have done a terrific job of communicating these changes and involving partners in the thinking behind them and the design and the decision-making behind them. And they basically said, we're just not going to impose this on you. Whether they revisit any of these issues going forward and do it maybe in a more effective way is something that remains to be seen. And there are other sort of implications of this that remain to be seen. But I'm gonna hand things over to Dave now, and I'm going to explain why we wanted him on the show here and are very glad that he was able to join us on short notice. Dave is in this kind of unique position. He is very, very tightly plugged into the Microsoft Partner Program at very senior levels, and he knows a lot of people, has connections inside of Microsoft. He is also very tightly plugged in with many, many partners out in the Microsoft channel and has been for many years. And so he is one of those rare individuals out there who can translate Microsoft to channel partners and also translate channel partners to Microsoft. He's this guy in the middle who can help these two constituencies understand each other. And he's kind of the perfect guy, basically, to bring in at the end of this tumultuous process here and get some feedback. So with that, Dave, I'm handing it over to you. Help us understand what happened here, why partners were so upset, and what happens next from a Microsoft.
And tell us why you are so in love with this idea and hope that they do it 100%.
First of all, great intro on both of your sides. And Rich, you did an awesome recap of the tale of events in the news, because the news has literally been on fire for 5 days. And when you have so many people talking and so many people talking at different channels, public, private, media, it becomes difficult sometimes keeping track of all the conversations and who's saying what. So Rich, you did really well. To put some quick bearing on this conversation to help people understand, I do wear a couple hats in life, and one of those is I'm a partner like a lot of you. So I've been a Microsoft partner for a long time. I go back to the DOS 1.0 days, and I continue to today's technology and run a 22-year MSP IT Innovators. In addition to that, I'm also a Microsoft MVP, so I get a lot of the back channel technical product information. And then uniquely, I'm also a Microsoft influencer, and that runs at the worldwide level that happens to be underneath Gabriella Schuster / Toby Richards. So hence we get a lot of insight, a lot of opportunity to express partner opinions, and likewise to hear the direction that Microsoft is going. Most of it's NDA, so we're not able to share it. Rich is actually in a great seat because he receives that information that's public early on, so he can share that out with the vast community that the media has. So between us, we really have a really good handle on what's going down. So that's kind of helps put this in perspective. I think the reason Rich, to answer your question, I think the first reason that partners are really upset is, one, this caught them off guard. They didn't know it was coming. Now, that includes partners that are just, part of that 300,000 roughly in the U.S., 600,000 worldwide. That includes what we call the breadth partners, meaning the vast majority of partners. That includes the MAPS people that you talked about earlier. That includes the competency partners, silver, gold. So for a lot of them, they didn't really have a heads up. And therefore, they learned about it kind of slow, i.e. over a day. That's in our world now, right? But then the news people started commenting, and as they commented, that's really when it got viral. That's when the news really started reaching everybody. And then they started saying, what is this news? That's when they realized what the changes were. And at surface level, those changes weren't good. Meaning, the news that they heard was that their internal use rights were being either taken away or greatly limited. their ability to have on-prem tickets for support was going to go away. The things you highlighted, the fact that a lot of the software that they used to run their business for over a decade was going to go away. Now, granted, they had a year, but that's still minor details. Everybody just heard it's going to go away. And even when you have a year, it's still major impact. It's a financial impact. And it's also messing with a partner's business model, how they run their business. And when you impact a partner's business model, you're going to hear about it. So a lot of things happened all at once. We can talk about why it happened, and you know, I don't want to use the word justifications. I want to try to handle it not from an emotional perspective, but we can definitely talk about, you know, why it was done, and then we can also fast forward into the second announcement that Gabriella Schuster did this morning. And so, Rich, kind of guide me real quick which direction you want to go, and I'll follow your lead. Or Matt.
Yeah, I gotta. So this is just to put some historical precedence. This is not the first time they've scaled back the IUR program, because I remember they used to give partners like 1,000 Office 365 licenses to play with, and like now you get like 10, right? So I mean, but okay, yeah. But. Go ahead.
And the cloud really brought a lot of that. Is why that happened. So in the beginning, as Rich said, I mean, this is not new. This is over a decade. For over a decade, Microsoft was known for being the business on-premise solution for partners, and in doing so, we could download. I mean, old school, we used to get disk media, and that had a cost to it. And you know, people like to hug servers and hug things, right? So they enjoyed hugging their media. And in the early days, Microsoft controlled cost because we were receiving hundreds of CDs, and they converted the program to DVD. So it was an evolution, right? It made sense. We continued all those benefits, and Microsoft lowered their cost by going to DVD. As the cloud came in and high connectivity bandwidth came in, they stopped the DVD and they gave us the ability to download the content. So fine, it put a bit of a burden on every partner. They had to download everything that was being shipped to them, but that was okay. We all hold that technology and that ability, and we did it. No complaints. But we could continue to use those IUR rights and that software to learn and run our business. But as you can tell, the program, as you said, kept evolving, however that form was. The thing that's happened recently, and when I say recently, I mean several years. What's happened recently, of course, is cloud, which is on fire. Everybody's going cloud. Well, that cloud now has real cost associated. I mean, it has Azure fees, data center fees, disk storage fees, all kinds of fees. And those are something that Microsoft historically did not have to contend with, meaning when they delivered these partner programs. Now they do. And, you know, like any large organization, you don't always know the cost until somebody, quote, in accounting slides the piece of paper in front of you and says, approve this $1. And you look at it and you go, wow, where'd that come from?
Right. And well, it seems to me that, you know, I agree with you that they were a little hasty in saying out of the middle of nowhere, hey, guess what? It's all going away. But you can enjoy a free lunch for as long as it lasts, but a free lunch is still a free lunch.
Now let's correct that, because this is important. It's not a free lunch, and I don't mean to jump on your phrase there, but let me explain real quick. Partners pay for these programs. So Maps has a cost that partners pay. And silver is a fee they pay, and gold is a fee they pay. The point being is a lot of partners feel like they're paying, and therefore these are rights that they've been given, and they should keep because they continue to pay. And some of those fees they pay go up. So to them, they understand there's cost, but they also understand they're paying. And
what's the value proposition?
Yeah.
So, but they're not paying. The program's not billed as you're paying for this, therefore you get this product, right? They're just It's been a side benefit.
Okay.
But part of the value proposition of partnership, right?
Part of the value proposition, part of the package. And it became expected to be part of the package, because when you run your business, I mean, imagine really quick that you ran your business, QuickBooks, we'll just throw a name out there, and you have years, 10 plus years of financials in QuickBooks. And all of a sudden somebody came along and said, you're not allowed to run QuickBooks anymore to run your business. Now you have to, I mean, it's a disruptor, right? Now you had all of your accounts payable, accounts receivable, balance sheet, income statement, P&L, everything running on a platform that you're not officially allowed to use anymore. And therefore, you'd have to find alternate answers. And that's the way it was perceived. That's the way that the community views it. And that's why a lot of the outrage.
Understood. But to clear up the analogy a little bit, though, it's not that QuickBooks said you're not allowed to use the software anymore. They're saying you're not allowed to use it for free anymore, right? Partners could still choose to pay for whatever software they're using.
Hands down.
Yeah. So I'm not siding necessarily totally with the partners. I'm not siding against Microsoft either. I think there's a happy balance, right?
There is.
Whereas, maybe partners could get a certain amount of IUR, enough to do demos and to sell, of course, and to understand. But if you're going to rely on it to run your business, like you're selling it to every other business in the world, maybe Microsoft just discounts it, right? You're a partner, but you want to run your business on it, you'll get, you just have to cover whatever the cost is to us to host it or whatever.
Right. Now, in all fairness, and like any story, there's always multiple pieces that make it up, right?
Right.
And this story is no different. And if I was to segment quickly this story, I'd put it into 3 sections. What we've discussed so far is section 1. And, section 2 is what happened this morning, meaning Gabriella Schuster made an incredible announcement, and I give her incredible respect in multiple areas. One, I still say Microsoft, hands down, is the best partner program in the industry. It really is. And I've seen a lot of partner programs, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years. So and that being said, sure, it's got lots of problems. Most things do, right? But with that being said, when an uproar happened, they were responsive, meaning they said, okay, this is what we felt we were doing. We did it. This is the loud voices that came back to us. So some of those decisions that we made, well, okay, perhaps those weren't the best way to implement them. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about, Microsoft, $1 trillion company on stock in finance, and 600,000 partners, and they literally addressed and diverse course in what, a 5-day, 4-day period, which is, give or take, which is incredible. And Gabriella has always had partners first. Microsoft still needs to make decisions, but I think when they realized the impact that was honestly happening in the field, they realized we got to take care of partners first, and partners will take care of us. And
never a good idea to hose the people who are selling your stuff.
Yeah, I get it. So that to me is the second part of the story, and we can definitely dive into that, because there's how did that change happen, and what was the change, because they didn't reverse everything, and what they we can talk about what they did do. The third part of the story is the story nobody's really heard yet, and the third part of the story, everybody has faults. I'm going to preface this. I think if there's a fault to throw at Microsoft, it's the fact that they announced the bad news before they announced the good news. And the good news they plan to announce at Inspire, which is the annual conference that starts this coming week in Vegas. So they have all of this information to share about how they're enhancing the program, putting over $400 million into the program on top of the money they already invest. And they're actually adding an incredible amount of value. But that was, quote, held on to because Inspire's coming up, and you got to go on stage and rah and tell your story, and that's all great. But the problem is that, as Rich said back a few days ago, the bad news came out. So most people heard the bad news without yet hearing the good news. And therefore, it was hard for them to scale it. You know what I mean? Does the good news outweigh the bad news? Tell us really when the dust settles, what does it mean to us? And no partner to this day can do that because they haven't heard the good news yet that's going to happen at Inspire. And those are the three pieces that really go together to make this whole story.
Now, I want to jump in quickly there because we spoke about this, I think it was Wednesday. And one of the things we talked about a little bit with respect to that good news that people haven't heard yet is that a lot of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of it applies very much to the silver and gold partners, not as much to the Action Pack partners.
It'd be a true statement. So another way to, I agree with you. Another way to phrase it is that Microsoft wants to invest and help those partners gain more business that are engaging with them. And when you have, roughly 600,000 partners around the world, you have to try to figure out who's the partners that want to engage. Who are the partners that want to raise their skill sets? Who are the partners that are, promoting, selling, supporting your product? And for them to figure that out in a scalable, vast way, it's the competency partners. And therefore, when a lot of the good news comes out, it's going to be focused to anyone who's a competency partner. And you're right, there's way more breadth partners around the world than there are competency partners. So there is a message. And the message is that we're putting more money in, we're giving you more features, and we're going to focus on providing those to the partners that are more engaged with us, at least in the beginning. And when that news comes out, there is news for all partners, hands down. But your statement's also true that if you, percentage-wise, when you release something, you're going to release it to the partners that are more engaged in the system as a whole. So it makes sense. I'm not trying to judge it right or wrong. I'm just saying I see why they're doing it that way. I think there is something there for everybody, but it's not equally proportionate.
And I will say, I profile some vendors' partner program every month for our magazine, and it's pretty much a standard part of every interview I do, for those articles that whoever is running this company's partner program is going to say, we want to invest in the partners who are invested in us. That's just sort of industry standard practice. It feels a little bit different. It looks a little bit different with Microsoft, just given that, they've got 300,000 partners around the world. And like you said, a lot of those partners, just the scale of the partner program, the number of partners who are working with the company, but not at a really elevated level. There are a lot of people who get a lot more people who get affected by that kind of a thing than with
hands down. And I think one of the goals that should be, and I'm not saying it's not, but if you ask me to prioritize goals, one of those goals is to help partners evolve through the process. Meaning, whatever level you're at, the goal obviously is to continue to get better at working that process, growing your business. So I think
as long as you didn't say the goal is getting to the next level, because then you'd owe Manuel Palachuk like $5.
I love Manuel. I know Manuel really well. So kudos to Manuel Palachuk. But I think a goal needs to be, if Microsoft is going to put focus on these partners, then they need to help more partners reach that level as well at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Now, I want to circle back to something you said there that intrigued me, and here comes some real-time reporting, ladies and gentlemen. I think because when you were talking about part two, the information from Gabriella Schuster's blog post and some follow-up to that I got from Microsoft PR indicates that all of those unpopular changes have been rolled back. The restrictions to the IUR rights, the on-prem product support, the changes to the competency levels. But you said something in there that made it sound like that's an oversimplification. Did I misunderstand you or what?
So I'll answer you, but I'll slightly preface that I don't see what goes to the media. I hear and involved in a lot of NDA conversation, which obviously that part I'm not, I don't share. But the point being is that there's been a lot of media press post on what's been announced and what's been said. And I haven't gone through all of those yet because there's quite a few in order to hear everything that was announced. But to the best of my understanding, a couple things were done. And that was, as an example, the news that IUR rights for business use were being taken away, but you had a year to adjust to that. And then part of what was announced is that was extended for another year, i.e. 2 years. And then at the same breath, it was said that what was taken away for the on-prem incidences, those are going to be brought back. So if you just take those two, you can see where it's been modified and one's been totally rescinded. But they're not 100%. Notice I can't make the statement for the whole package.
Sure.
And then also, the whole package hasn't been rescinded because everybody doesn't know the whole package. That's the third part. That's all of the new news that's going to be announced at Inspire. And that hasn't been rescinded, meaning that the plans for announcements of ads and more money and positive things that are all going to happen are still in the plans to be announced next week. So that's not rescinded. So we're going to have to go through this a little bit finer than swinging an axe. And part of that is going to be reading the official announcements that are coming out from Microsoft. You received some, and but there's still, I'm sure, more that will follow. I think that was, hey, let's address the elephant in the room, and it was good. But I think there's still more detail to follow.
Well, and if it doesn't solve the problem, that if it really is costing them too much to do that, they're still going to have to address it. They'll just address it in a different way.
Well, so
down the road.
Totally agree. And that goes back to the point that, if I don't like to use the word fault, but if you try to figure out what went wrong is that the bad news was delivered before the good news. The nice thing is that next week at Inspire, people are going to hear the good news. So that means that Microsoft now has the ability that at least partners are more aware, meaning they now know what happened, what got corrected. Now they're going to hear the good news. Now Microsoft has the ability to say, how do we do this right? Meaning, how do we, now that they knew, quote, quote, what the changes were going to be, now that they know what we interim have done to take care of our partners, and now that they know the good news, now we need to regroup and determine how are we moving forward dealing with our cloud cost. Now that all of that news is out there, now how we're going to go ahead and do it the right way. That probably should have been done in the first place, but water under the bridge, as they call it.
So if you rip off a Band-Aid and then if you put it back on, does it still hurt as much the second time you rip it off? That is a good question. Was that?
Didn't you ever hear that adage that if you have a Band-Aid on this arm and it hurts, if you smack this arm, this one doesn't hurt as bad anymore?
I've never heard that.
So, everything's relative, right? So
you shouldn't smack your relatives. That's not good.
So, the bottom line is we all know that every program out there is going to continue to evolve and change. And I wouldn't expect anything else. The difference is that you shouldn't be harming partners in the process. So whatever changes they need to make, and they just need to find a positive way to deal with their growth. Rich named a figure, and he did it really fast. So fast that a lot of people probably missed it. And that is that Microsoft is onboarding roughly, I'll give you two different numbers because I've heard officials tout both, 7,000 new partners a month. And another figure I heard from a top executive was 9,000 partners a month. Anybody in the channel would love to have that problem. And It's a lot of partners, and it's a growth curve that Microsoft, quite honestly, being one of the best programs in the industry, it really is, even with all of its flaws, because everything has flaws. The bottom line is a lot of partners want to be part of it, and Microsoft has to learn in this cloud era how to handle all of that demand, and they're going to have to do something. There's no doubt. But that something is going to have to be something that takes care of their partners at the same time.
Let me ask you this, because when the word was getting around, and my story went around about how the issue, because for a long time partners had no idea why this was happening at all, and then Microsoft said, well, it's related to cost. And I got a lot of feedback from partners who just didn't buy that. Either they just didn't really believe that cost could be that big an issue for Microsoft, or they said, I'm paying fees, that should defray the cost issue. So there was a lot of skepticism about I'll use the word, you didn't want to, the justification that Microsoft applied to these changes in explaining them. And now, and it's, again, a little over 3 hours since the decision to roll back those changes has been announced. So it's pretty quick at this point. But I've already received a little feedback from some partners, and the gist of it, I would say, is essentially, I'm really glad they made this decision, but they shouldn't have made the wrong decision they did in the first place. So I'm wondering about what happens from here in terms of the relationship between Microsoft and its partners. And is there some kind of a breach of trust that's happened here that Microsoft now is going to have to recover from?
I'll answer you a bit of a different way, because that's an emotional question, and it is part of a business question too. I get it, but let me shed a different perspective to you, and that is, let's just take Maps, which is Microsoft Action Pack subscription. Maps, roughly, I feel like it's an airline. You know how one person on the airline pays $1,000 for their seat, and the person sitting beside them got their seat for $250, and the person beside them paid $450. It's a bizarre industry, right? So the price of Maps has changed. So, but I'm going to use the number 500 because it's a nice round number. So partners pay roughly $500 for Maps. Through the course of time, I would say Maps has about $30,000 worth of value for what they received for the 500. That's a big stretch difference. And I think Microsoft views it as an investment, meaning if you were to go out and buy all of that product on the shelf, so to speak, and you also, we got like 10 incidences to call Microsoft support at $500 a pop. So those 10 at 500 is 5,000 before you even go to step 2. So my point is that great value, which it is, high worth, but the bottom line is it still has cost associated. Microsoft, I think, treats it as an investment in the partner community, which it is. And as partners, you mentioned eating your own dog food. Here's the part I think Microsoft underestimated. A lot of partners that are SMB, small, medium business, they don't have huge staff and huge budgets and large facilities. What that means what's that translate to for a partner? That means that when they install that software and use it to run their business, that is their training. That is their lab. That is their learning. That's what they're using to fulfill that need. Furthermore, when they go and talk to a prospect client, what do you know the best? What you use yourself. Meaning they don't want to go install a demo with fake data that they would have to learn the data in order to talk to a potential client. What data they know the best? Their own. So when an SMB goes and talks to a prospect and educates them and sells them, they did so using that software that they got through the partnership that they show to a client. And to take that away, they view that, and I get it, as you're taking away our demo, you're taking away our learning, our training, and what we use for the sales process with our clients. If you're enterprise, you don't view it that way because you have more resources, more cash. You do have a demo lab. You do have people that learn the demo data, and it's a different paradigm. So I understand why SMB views it that way. I'm not sure Microsoft realized that SMB utilized their software in such a way. And so there's a little bit of education that needs to happen, and that's why taking it away had a much greater impact than simply saying, we took something away. Oh, well. It had a bigger impact on their overall business and how they run it and how they leverage it.
So it's not a story of the bad news bears. This is a story of the three bears, right? We just haven't seen what Baby Bear has that's just right. Right. So we got what was bad, but we were missing Mama Bear, the too cold, right? We got the too hot, not the too cold. So what I want to see is to see if you can come back after Inspire, after the good side is, and then we can see if we end up with something edible.
Awesome.
Does that sound like a plan, Dave? Will you come back and join us?
Oh, I'm delighted anytime. You guys rock, and I appreciate you engaging together, and anytime, that.
All right. Well, we got about 15 minutes here to wrap up the rest of the stories of our show, but I want to thank you for joining us today. Expecting you to call back.
I want to jump in real quick and point out, because as by way of thanking Dave, next week in Anaheim, California, Dave, the Q3 edition of your event is happening.
I appreciate that, Rich. Yeah, if you'll allow me, as you just did.
Plug away, good sir. Plug away.
Yeah, it's really quick. So one of the other hats that I wear is running a quarterly technology conference for our industry. And it absolutely has focus on both, technology professionals and a lot of Microsoft partners as well. And it happens each quarter. It happens in Southern California. And the name of it is SMB Tech Fest. So obviously you could find that www.smbtechfest.com/events. And the one that Rich talked about, Rich will be there. Mm-hmm. And it's on July 18. And it is a filled day of speakers, new technologies, learning things to grow your business, learning things to advance your career. I encourage you to join us. And if that's short notice, then we have Q4 October, which is October 17th, that the show is going to happen again with all new speakers and all new content. And you should absolutely learn about it. If you're a partner, you drop me a line and I'll take care of you to make sure that you have access to that, as that is the focus of who it serves. So hopefully somewhere in this podcast, you might share how people can reach out to me.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll put a link in the description here on YouTube and also on our show notes page at channelpronetwork.com. I'd like to thank Mr. Dave Seibert, the man of many hats, although you have not worn a single hat on this broadcast, I have to say. So next time I want to see some action going on up here, okay?
They're proverbial invisible hats.
I like the invisible hats. And we will just see you hopefully in a few short weeks to come back and talk about what came out of Microsoft Inspire and to kind of put all of this into perspective for all the partners out there. So thank you very much, Dave, for joining us.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Rich.
See you next week, Dave.
All right.
All right, Rich, we got one other story coming out of the Microsoft show, as well as some other news and some other stories. We'll see what we can get through in 15 minutes and call it a day from there. What do you say?
All right.
All right. So the next one is another big software suite that Microsoft has been pushing a lot, which is the Teams suite. There's some new collaboration stuff going on there. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so, pretty much anytime Microsoft hosts an event, they issue a ton of news around that. Inspire is no exception. So, in fact, yesterday there was a giant pile of news out of Microsoft. There's all sorts of stuff, obviously, still to come next week we don't even know about, or at least it hasn't been publicly disclosed yet. But one of the things that they did talk about yesterday was some updates that they are introducing to Microsoft Teams. Now, Teams is a chat-based collaboration tool. It's basically Microsoft's answer to Slack. Slack has really, it's fair to say, kind of revolutionized office productivity businesses. It's very widely adopted, rapidly adopted. So Microsoft created its own version of that called Teams, rolled it into Office 365. And part of what's significant about this announcement that Microsoft made yesterday, yes, there's all sorts of interesting new functionality that's coming to Teams in terms of new ways to issue messages, to cross-post messages across different channels, to create or clock in or clock out. There's new functionality for shift workers. So if you want to trade shifts or punch in, punch out on the job, lots of new functionality that is being added to Teams. And anyone who's reselling that product will want to study up on that a little bit. But part of what Microsoft wanted the world to know this week is that there are over 13 million daily active users of Microsoft Teams right now. And I mean, that kind of speaks to, I know just anecdotally from conversations that I have with Office 365 resellers that Teams has sort of come out of nowhere to turn into this really core component of Office 365 and a big topic of conversation with customers. And that number kind of underscores that. So Teams has been around for 2 years. Slack has been around for 5 years. According to Slack's website, as of last night, they have 10 million plus daily active users. So, they had a 3-year head start on Microsoft, and in part, obviously, because Microsoft has bundled Teams into Office 365, and Office 365 is enormously popular. Microsoft is now 3 million daily active users ahead of Slack already, and the curve, they actually, when we were at this press briefing earlier in the week, they showed us the graph of how rapidly Teams adoption is going, and it's curved north. It's accelerating at this point. And again, part of that is because it's part of Office 365. Lots of Office 365 subscribers are paying for it already, but it also kind of serves as this nice hub for accessing a lot of other Office 365 tools. You can get to SharePoint and Word and Excel from inside of Teams. Teams has its own voice calling functionality, its own video functionality that essentially replaces what Skype for Business can do. And the Microsoft executives we spoke to earlier in the week said they didn't provide a timeline, but they said eventually Skype for Business is going away because we think Teams does a better job of what Skype for Business does today. And we really want our customers to be doing all that through Teams at some point. As soon as possible anyway. So in a relatively short period of time, Teams has actually become a pretty important solution for Microsoft and its partners. And one of the things Gabriella Schuster said on Tuesday is that she regards Teams as possibly the biggest partner opportunity for the year ahead in terms of implementing it, customizing workflows around it, training people to use it, giant opportunity. So big product that, it didn't exist 3 years ago and not a whole lot of people had heard of 2 years ago.
It's also worth pointing out, like Slack, Teams has a free version available. I'm curious how much that has helped adoption for Teams versus just what people gravitated to because it's already part of the Office suite.
It's a good question, actually. I don't know the answer. It would be interesting to know what percentage of Team users today started out on, Team subscribers started out on the free version. What percentage of the 13 plus million, is using the free edition? I don't know that actually, but that does bring up one other thing that Microsoft announced with respect to Teams this week, which is that there is a new partner-only free trial option. So there is a free version of Teams with restricted functionality. But beginning August 1st, I believe it is, there's also going to be the option, partners are going to have the option of offering the complete Teams experience to their customers for a 6-month period. And you will be able to do that only for customers of yours who are not in the cloud already. So you can't do it with existing Office 365 subscribers who don't have Teams in their subscription, for example. The only two communities that qualify are people who are doing nothing in the cloud with Microsoft today, or whose only solution in the cloud with Microsoft today is Exchange Online. For those customers, you will have the option of giving them the complete Teams application free for 6 months.
Yeah, that's a smart play for Microsoft because Teams really does hook into the whole rest of the Office 365 suite. We can talk a lot about Teams. It's not something that we've actually embraced here internally yet, but I know the writing is on the wall
Yeah.
And it's cool. I want to. It's just, sometimes teaching old dogs new tricks is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. So we had a few other stories. We're actually rapidly running out of time here. Why don't we hit into our other news? And we have 3 other stories, Rich. I don't know if we're going to get to them.
Yeah, probably won't get to the 3 other stories. Some of those we can maybe pick up on next week. But just as long as we're talking about Teams, we can kind of roll in one last piece of news, which is just that earlier this week, BitTitan added support for Teams to its Migration Wiz product. So Migration Wiz is really the product that kind of made BitTitan the big name out there in the cloud world that it is today, and it assists partners in migrating customers into G Suite and especially Office 365. Now they have added the ability to do essentially tenant-to-tenant migrations for Microsoft Teams users. So, I mean, you're not necessarily migrating people who are entirely new to Teams into Teams, but as end users switch subscription levels, or maybe they're involved in merger and acquisition activity and they've got to switch from their previous Office 365 tenant to a new one. There's this whole new migration challenge that's popped up for the end users and their partners. And obviously what the end users want is for all of the information inside Teams to move over to that new location, that new tenant intact, and everything to be laid out the same and to work the same. Might sound like a simple problem to fix. It's actually not. And so,
man, you think Microsoft would have solved that, though? I mean, if you're using their product in one tenant and going to another, you think that would be easy, but it really isn't.
It isn't. And BitTitan has added that capability now to Migration Wiz. There are other I couldn't name them for you. I do know that there are other products that handle that kind of scenario. The BitTitan folks will tell you that they've gone down to a level of detail that they say their competitors have not, in terms of pulling over the emoticons and you name it, the smallest detail of your Teams implementation is going to get carried over to the new location with close to perfect fidelity. But there are other options for doing that. But yeah, it's not something that you can get straight from Microsoft itself.
Yeah, good. Well, good for them for rolling that out. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more integration and new features for all up and down the Office 365 and Azure stack as Inspire rolls around next week. So that's going to be a big show.
It really is. It's just going to be very interesting. There's going to be a lot of news out of there. You're right, but just the atmosphere, what partners are kind of thinking and feeling based on what's happened in the last 10 days. And you know what? I'll tell you this. At some point, I can't remember if it's Monday or Wednesday, but Schuster does a keynote, at the conference, and it's going to be interesting for her to walk out on that stage and address this issue. And I respect her for stepping. It's a challenging job that she's going to have to do.
She'll be all right. Everybody. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm going to wait until after Inspire to chime in too much. I've shared a little bit, but I mean, clearly they have to address this, right? If it's costing, there's a lot of Microsoft partners, and if all of them are using their products in the cloud, which does have a cost, for basically nothing, that's something they're not going to run that on their bottom line forever. They're going to have to do something. So they may have backtracked for now. It's not going to stay that way. So partners better prepare. But I think, like I said, I think there's a happy balance between giving partners a break on that software, because there's a lot of benefit for them to use it and have access to it at little to no cost. But partners also need to be respectful that, it's not just like handing you the bits and you walking away and running it on yourself. There's cloud cycle, storage, all kinds of stuff. I mean, just our 7-person team internally probably uses 5 terabytes of cloud storage, which they're duplicating, replicating, backing up. There's a definitely cost. Imagine, and that's just 7 people, right? Right. Or 8 people, however many are on our tenant, like of internal people we have on our tenant. That's if you imagine you had 30, 40, 50, 100 people all running for nothing, that's crazy, you know? So I think there's going to be a balance to be had, and everyone's going to have to be respectful. But that said, Microsoft needs to respect partners, because it ain't like Microsoft is broke.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
they got a lot of money. I think they could be generous here for those who are selling their stuff.
You know, Dave touched on this, and I think he's absolutely right. There is what Microsoft did, and then there is how they told people about what they did. And I think they did a pretty poor job of, first of all, just previewing, letting partners know, hey, we've got this cost issue, and we've got to figure out something to do about it. And then involving partners in that process. You know, they could have, I don't know what the exact right answer is, but they could have done focus groups. They could have provided an opportunity for people to comment on plans that Microsoft had in terms of how they were going to address the issue. They kind of blindsided partners with this. And that's a big part of why, you know, this controversy has happened. And so I think
that's a communication strategy, Rich. I don't think it was an accident. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. Right? You throw the worst case scenario out there, you get people to see it, and then you backtrack it, and then whatever they do after this is not going to seem as bad. Right? If they just gone with whatever they're going to do with it, would have seemed just as horrible. So this, Microsoft has how many thousands and thousands and thousands of workers, right? This was not a mistake, right? I'm not going to give them this whole like, oh, they had no idea. They know exactly what they're doing. And that's okay, right? As long as there's still value and it's still, like, I think people should look through the crap and say, obviously they wanted to put the dire worst case out there, so that way, you know, the reality that comes doesn't seem as bad.
If that was the plan, it was a bad plan. Because I mean, this exploded in their face. This
sure.
has been a mess for them.
This is politics, Rich. It's not. I mean, just look at politics, right? You know, you announce that you're going to raise income taxes 500%, right? But then you really only do it 100%, and you add on fees to vehicles. They're doing this in Illinois right now. The vehicle stickers, and you know, they spread it out, right? But they still got their 100% tax, is what they really wanted. Right.
Well, I mean, my expectation is, and maybe I'm wrong, it'll be interesting to see if I'm wrong, but based in part on that blog post this morning, it sounded to me like they have figured out that just dumping this on partners is probably a bad idea, and that they should involve partners more, collect more feedback. So what I'm saying basically is, if they thought that they could just sort of announce this and deal with the consequences, and, you know, they're
no, what I'm saying is I think they announced it deliberately and already had plans to pull it back. That's to put something out later that's not as bad, but they'll seem like heroes in the process. That's my opinion. I'll be curious. That opinion might change after I see what they announce at Inspire, because right now we are missing another part of this.
Yeah.
But when the dust settles and we get through Inspire and we see what they actually do to pull back on this, then I'll see if my tune changes. But that's my opinion right now.
Well, let's revisit this. I mean, there will be plenty of news from Inspire to talk about in the next episode. So
great. So we'll see how it goes. People, if you think I'm nuts, let me know. podcast@channelpronetwork.com. If you think I might be onto something, then send it just to Rich, so that way.
I predict. I think if we were to somehow magically do an instant poll of everyone who listens to the podcast, you know, 95+% of them would say you are dead on right, and I'm the crazy one.
We'll see. Yeah. But I also have very little trust in big giant corporations who do this kind of stuff. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I always feel like there's more there than what they're saying. Right. And that mistakes like that don't happen because it's so obvious what the reaction would be. So why, if they didn't realize that was going to be the reaction, then they really are idiots. And I just don't think that's the case.
We've run out of time.
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's going to wrap up episode 110. Kind of a Microsoft Focus edition here, but lots of news, lots of interesting things to go through, and more. And there's going to be more on this So it'll be fun to cover over the coming weeks. Thanks again to Dave Seibert from IT Innovators for coming on. Don't forget to check out his event, SMB Tech Fest, one going on next week on July 18th and another one in October. We'll post the links for you guys to check those out. But big thanks for him to come on, and hopefully we'll see him back again soon. If you want to follow us on the social medias, you can do so. We're on Facebook, ChannelPro Network on Facebook, at ChannelPro SMB on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I'm at Matt Whitlock on Twitter. Rich, you are
at Rich Free.
And of course, the website is channelpronetwork.com. Mark it as your start page. News breaking all day, every day on that homepage. So set it there and always be one step ahead of your competitors and knowing what's going on. And of course, subscribe to ChannelPro Weekly. You can do so here in YouTube. You can hit subscribe, but that doesn't actually do anything anymore. You now have to hit a bell. So if you see the subscribe button, hit it, but then hit the bell, and then you might be notified when we're doing stuff. If you listen on audio, you can absolutely still find us anywhere podcasts are typically aggregated or collected. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher. You go out there, you'll find us. If you have a favorite RSS, like podcast kind of reader, and you just need an RSS feed, you can go to our site and grab that. So on behalf of Mr. Rich Freeman and myself and everyone here at Channel Pro, thank you for joining us for episode 110. We will be back next week. Goodbye.